Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
Hey, good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. And today I have, one of my favorite co-hosts, Tom Campbell, and he's doing a really interesting project right now, and he's asking for assistance. So we want to promote that a little bit. I say this often, but Tom is just a wealth of knowledge, and if you're ever interested in getting, really understanding some of the work that he's doing, and just getting a better understanding of how entropy and consciousness and our fears play such a huge role in what we do. And now, I know that the research is more on proving that we are basically a virtual reality, which is very cool. And I really like how Tom explains it. And we've done shows on it before, but I do, really enjoy this. And so I want to encourage you that for those of you that love our show, and I know that there's a lot because we get comments all the time, please, join in on this great project and assist Tom. And, we've been doing all this work, and you get all this information for free. And Tom has hours and days of workshops on YouTube. So, you can get all of the information you've ever wanted and just, stay there for weeks upon weeks to get that info. So do what you can and assist to make this project happen. I think we're already almost at our first goal, so that's awesome. But
yes.
Yeah. So thanks, Tom, always for joining us, and let's chat a little bit about that, and then we'll get into our own topic.
Okay. Well, what we've got going now is a Kickstart. What do we call it? A campaign, a Kickstart campaign, and we're trying to raise money so that we can hire the professional help, the lab space, and the people that will get these experiments done. I have a set of experiments, physics experiments, quantum mechanics experiments that will verify that this is a virtual reality. So the only way these things can work, or the only explanation for them, is that indeed this is a virtual reality. And the reason for doing that is that I would like the physicists to sooner rather than later come to that conclusion that indeed this is a virtual reality, because that means that we are a subset of something more significant, more fundamental, and that more significant, more fundamental thing is non-physical to us. So that's a pretty big step for science to come along and say that, we're a subset of something non-physical. Right. That's a massive step. And the next step, and it's the only logical conclusion one can come to then, is that consciousness is the computer of this virtual reality. Right. And then once you understand consciousness as a computer, and that we are all subsets of consciousness, we the players, as opposed to we the bodies that are the avatars, that consciousness is a social system of individuated units of consciousness, and the way that you optimize a social system is by cooperation and caring and compassion. That's how you optimize a social system. So then the question is, well, what's this virtual reality here for? Why would this system create this virtual reality? And then a little logic takes you to the conclusion that this virtual reality is an entropy reduction trainer. In other words, it's a place for us to make choices to enable us to grow up, to become love, to become more considerate of others, to care about others, to let go of our fear, our ego, our beliefs, and our self-centeredness, and so that it's not all about us, and that this is a place to make choices to learn how to do that. So all of that falls out. So it's not really that these experiments themselves are such a really big deal in the big picture. And the way they are, if they work out the way I say, they'll completely change science. It'll rewrite a whole new version of quantum mechanics. It'll modify relativity. It'll create a whole new science that'll be based on a bigger picture rather than on the little picture of materialism that it's based on now. So the science part of it is pretty neat. That's, I guess, a big thing by itself. But really the thing that interests me is that it's the first step in a series of a couple of logical steps that takes us to our purpose. What's our purpose? Why are we here? What's the point of us being here? And it's to grow up. It's to decrease our entropy, which is the same thing as saying to grow spiritually, to, become love, to care about others. That's what we're here for. That's on the path of consciousness evolution. And I know just stating it real shortly like that, it'll seem like I'm just making all that up because it sounds good. But really there is a very tight logic, science that leads to that sequence of conclusions. It's not just me making stuff up because it sounds nice and sweet and happy, It's the way it is. It's the nature of our reality. And when we understand that, then all of the things that are now called paranormal will just be normal. Because when you have an understanding of a bigger picture, all that stuff becomes normal. It's part of the way things are. So now science would be able to tell us about our subjective experiences as well as about our objective experiences. So you see, science now blooms into a whole bigger purview of things that it can say something intelligent about, things that it can turn into facts. So it's kind of a big deal in that sense. If you see where it's all going, my hope is that it will, over a decade or two, actually change the world. And I say that because we've always had people who have understood the big picture. 2,400 years ago, Buddha said that this reality was an illusion. Well, it's the best you could say in those days about this reality being a virtual reality. It's an illusion. It's not real. There's another purpose behind it, and that purpose is to grow up and become love. And the Buddha said all that. So we've had these little bubbles of enlightenment all over the globe. Every nation, every culture has produced those, but they always stay in the margins. They're never mainstream society. They're always in the margins. Well, today, the high priests of our culture, of Western culture anyway, and now Western culture is kind of spread all over the world, so it's pretty much world culture. The high priests of our culture are the scientists. It's the high priests that tell us what to believe. That's always been the role of the high priest. They tell us what is truth and what isn't to the people who really don't want to think for themselves, which is the majority of people. So when the high priests say that this is a virtual reality, and then the logic about conscious being the computer and love being the answer falls out of that, it will go mainstream. It won't be in the margins anymore. With an internet that can spread things to billions of people in a week, you see, it's not like the times of the Buddha where, to go 20 miles is a long trip. And a lot of people never go that far away from where they're born because it takes you, a couple of days to walk that far. So it's not like that. So we have a real good chance now to change the world in the sense that we can get this sense of we're here to grow up, to be kind, to be caring, to be love. And that's our purpose. And that is science, not metaphysics or philosophy. But that comes to us by way of science. So what we've done is we've united physics and metaphysics. We've, the physical and the non-physical, mind and body, all those things now are seen to be, just different views of the same thing. There's just this one big understanding and all those things make sense. So that's what it's about, and these experiments are the thing to try to get that ball rolling, to bring the physicists in, to bring these ideas into the mainstream. So that's what it's all about. And we were trying to raise $150,000 to do these experiments. And experiments are very expensive to do. The equipment's very expensive, lab space is very expensive, hiring expertise that's done similar things before is very expensive. So the 150 was really like our very lowest amount. That's just enough to get started. Because with Kickstart, it works like this. You give them a minimum amount or amount that's your goal. If you don't make that goal, you don't get anything. You give it all back. That's the rule for a Kickstart program. So if we only made 145,000 and didn't make 150, we don't get a dime. It all goes back. So you try to put in the lowest number there that'll actually allow you to do, some of what you want to do. So that's our 150. It'll probably cost about twice that, about 300,000 to do all of the experiments. So we'd like to just keep on going to see if we can't get enough to do them all. But it looks like we're going to make that 150,000 probably sometime today. We're only about $2,000 short, and we've been gaining at least $2,000 a day at kind of our minimum at the lowest days. And we have almost half the time left. We've got 14 days remaining. That's another rule about Kickstarter. This campaign can only last 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you've either made your goal or not. So those are the limitations. So we've got another 14 days, and if we could double it, if we could go all the way to 300,000, then we would be able to do all of these experiments, a whole set of the experiments. They kind of show different things. So anyway, that's what it's all about, and you can go. Hopefully, you will put the Kickstarter page link URL under this, and I'll send that to you if you don't have it. And you can add that to it. And so, ladies and gentlemen who are watching this, if you go click on that, and in 30 days or in 14 days, it's going to be gone. But for the next 14 days, you will be able to contribute to this thing that may be world changing, may be life changing for a lot of people. Yeah. So it's a big, a big historical watershed moment, pretty much. So that's the deal. If you want to be a part of it, then get on over there and see if we can't get enough money to pay for all of the experiments. So that's what it's all about. Nice. And fortunately, I think we are going to make our minimum. We look like that's almost a shoo-in at this point. So we won't have to give it all back. That's a good thing. Now all we have to do is get the rest of it. Right. So that we can do everything we want. So anyway, that's where we're going with it. That's what it's all about. And if you have even $10, I think is the minimum contribution. If you even got $10, that's good. That's plenty. Enough people give $10. That's all we need. So join us if you feel like it's something you want to do.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm going to put it in my newsletter as well that goes out in a couple days. So. Hopefully. And you've created a lovely video. It explains a lot of stuff. It's fascinating. So good luck with that. I'm glad that you are reaching your first goal already, and we're only halfway there. That's awesome. So yay.
Yay, yeah. We're actually going to get these experiments done, at least some of them. Right. We're gonna form a team and get some of them done. So that's very exciting. That
is exciting. All right. So I thought today we would talk a little bit about the filters that we sort of live with. Obviously and you will bring it down into consciousness and help us understand how they sort of work, but we're kind of born, my belief, regardless of whether you believe we have multiple lives or just one big life and kind of share consciousness with our soul group and God, whatever, however you believe what happens, we obviously in every culture have some indication that there is a higher power and that we are connected to that higher power. And so I believe that we come here choosing certain very interesting and something that's very important to us to work with or to work through our fears, like a specific core fear that sort of helps us grow and evolve towards what we're wanting. And we probably pick up a few of them. We probably have, certain goals at certain times. So we have this filter that we sort of view the world from, but it will always, not always, once we get it, it will be fine. But if we don't understand what's going on and we don't understand our fears, it sort of makes us see the world through that fear. So if I could give an example of abandonment, and I do believe a lot of people have this, whether they're conscious of it or not, but that feeling of being alone or possibly being betrayed by God. I mean, there's a whole background of the unconscious that we're sort of, connecting in with, like the collective unconscious. And so anyway, we have these filters that sort of make us view the world from that perspective, so that anything that happens to us, we sort of add it to the story, and we've talked about the story before, but that filter sort of makes us perceive everything from that one place, or from that place, until we move and grow towards the next phase that we're working on. But I think, does that sort of explain what I mean?
Yes, I think that's a good explanation. We can put it, everything actually works that way. It's not just our fears
Right.
that helps us create our reality, but our reality is created through this filter. Every part of our reality is created through this filter. Every single part of it, even the good parts, the bad parts, everything. Because the way reality works is that we get information through our senses. Okay, we get sense data, and that's just information. But we have to interpret that information as to what it means.
Right.
And it's that interpretation of this information for what it means is this filter you're talking about. You see, the data itself is neither here nor there. The data it's just data.
Right.
It's not information yet, it's just data. When we interpret it, we turn that data into information. So the sense data is just data. It's the stuff we collect. It's photons on our retina that creates a little pulse that runs down our optic nerve. It's just data. But we take that data and we interpret it. What does that mean? What did she mean when she said that? Everything in our world is interpreted. Well, our interpretations come from our own history. They come from our story. They come from what we believe. They come from our fear. They also come from our love. They come from our caring. They come from everything that we are, all of our experience. I just call that our experience base. Okay, so we have an experience base. Since we've been here, we have this experience base. And actually, we come here with a certain amount of things that define us. Even before we're born, and when we're born, we bring some of that in with us when we come. We have some attitudes or some other things that we come in with. But besides that, we've got the environmental part of it, and we've got the instinct part of it. Those things that we think and do just because we're human, and we've got human instincts. So take all of that stuff together, and that's what I call your experience base. That's what everything you've experienced. It's what you are inside. And that's how you interpret the data. And you can't interpret it any other way. When you get data, you have to interpret it, and you can't interpret it in terms of somebody else's experience. You can only interpret it in terms of your own. So you're stuck there, you see. Now, everybody's like that, and everybody's interpreting data in terms of their own experience base. So if you and I are communicating and I say a bunch of words, that's just data, not information. But you hear the words because you're a consciousness. When you hear those words, you start interpreting them into information about what I'm talking about. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? You're making all these interpretations, but they're just your interpretation of what I've said. They're not necessarily what I meant at all. They're not necessarily what I've implied. It's what you think these words mean. So we do that all the time. And, I talked about part of it is our instincts. Well, part of it depends whether you've got two X's or you've got an X and a Y in your chromosomes. We see the world differently, males and females. We interpret data differently. And that's the old, men are for Mars and women are for Venus thing, where we need to learn to communicate to each other because each person is interpreting what they get based on their own experience base. So this is not just a thing that has to do with our fear. It has to do with everything. It's just the way we are. But you see the problem. It's very difficult to understand somebody else. And once you have fears, Now, fears are a particular problem because fears color everything. When you see things in terms of fear, you interpret that in terms of your fear. So if you fear that people don't respect you, then whatever they say and however they say it, you will interpret it as not respecting you. And even if they act really nice and sweet, you'll say, they must want something. They really don't respect me. They want something. They're just being, sarcasm. You'll see it in some other way, or they're just trying to act like that because they're not being honest. They're being false, and that's just all your fear creating that interpretation. So you get to create your own reality in this way. Your reality is created in your mind. It's not somebody else's reality. It's only your reality. So you think you see the world the way it is, but you do not. You only see the world the way you think it is. That's not necessarily the way it is, and for most people, it's really not even that close, because most people have a lot of fears which then inform the way they interpret things, and what you think reality is, what you think those people mean, what you think you are relative what they are, and their intent and your intent, all of that is just not the way it is. It's just the way you think it is. So we live in these make-believe worlds. We live in our own reality, and fear is the thing that twists that reality the most. Those are the big things that twist it, because the fears kind of rub off on everything else. Right. If you're afraid of being inadequate, or afraid of abandonment, or afraid of you're just insecure, then if you're real insecure, everything's scary. If you're afraid of being inadequate, everything is showing you that you're inadequate. Therefore, you have strategies to deny that. You have strategies to deal with that. So you feel inadequate, what do? Well, there's two things you can do. Actually, there's more than two. There's three things you can do. The one thing you can do if you feel inadequate is try to cover it over with being brassy, with being bossy, with being a bully. You see, bullies really feel very inadequate. They feel really small and not likable and so on. So they cover that over with being brassy and forceful and demanding. You see, so that's one thing if we feel inadequate, so we can do that. The other thing we can do if we feel inadequate is we can be a shrinking violet. We can go kind of hide in the corner and avoid social situations and feel meek that we're just not much of anything, and nobody really wants to dance with us, and nobody really wants to talk to us, what do we do then? We say, well, all those people, they're so boring. They're so petty. They're so shallow. I don't really want to dance with those people. I don't even like those people. So that's another thing we do. You see, we make stuff up. We make up stories to make ourselves feel better about the fears we have. That helps us deny those fears. We don't say, "Oh, I'm afraid, of being unlovable. That's why I'm always rude to everybody, because my strategy is if you don't play, you can't lose. So I'm not going to try to be nice to anybody, because if I was nice and I got rejected, oh, that would be terrible. That would say something about me. But if I'm rude and get rejected, well, that's not about me. That's just because I'm rude. You see, so that's different. You see, that's not a fundamental problem. That's just the problem of behavior, and that's not a big deal. So we have these strategies. I can't lose if I don't play. The bully, the shrinking violet, and another real favorite one these days is the victim. We play the victim. Oh, it's not me. This world just sucks. I'm abused. I have all these people in my life that just don't treat me well. Life is abusive. Corporations are abusive. The government, everything's abusive, and I'm just this poor little victim in the middle of all this abusiveness, and I just don't have a chance. You see, that's another story we tell ourselves to cover up that fear that we're inadequate, that we're not capable, that we're unlovable. We cover that all up with victimhood. Of course, the problem with these stories we tell ourselves is, well, take the example of the victim. If you're a victim, you give away all your power. You no longer take responsibility for anything. You say, well, I'm not in charge of anything. I just bounce around. When the big guys bump me, I go wherever they knock me. I don't have any say in this. So you you refuse to be responsible for your life, because the responsibility now is out of your hands. You're just a victim. So that's the problem. As we have these fears, we give up our free will to the fear. So it's no longer us making the choices. We're just reacting out of our fear. We stop being responsible. We stop being in charge of our life, and we just complain about so-and-so. They're unfair. You know, your spouse isn't what you want them to be. Your children aren't what you want them to be. Nobody will do what you tell them to do. And of course, you know what should be done by everybody, but nobody else will agree with you. And oh, woe is me. You know, we get into all that stuff. So that's the problem. Yes, we live in our own reality. We create that reality by our experience base, and that fear is the thing that makes that reality look negative. You see, if we didn't have that fear, our reality might look positive. It might look really wonderful and happy. But when you have the fear, that makes your life look negative. It makes it look like you're in a trap. It makes you look like, you know, you're not getting what you deserve or what you need or what's fair. You have all this negative. You get stress. You're just going through the motions in your life. You're not really enjoying it. You're just playing out a role. You know, you get all this stuff. Well, all the basis of that is all this fear. That's how you're interpreting your life. It's not because your life has to be that way. It's because you make it that way by the way you interpret everything that happens to you. So fear has one of those things that about it that is true always and for everyone, and that is, if you are fearful, you will do, you will act, and you will say those things that make that fear come true.
Right.
So if you feel that you are inadequate, you will do, say, feel, you know, all those things that will actually make you be inadequate. You make your fears come true. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but the big one is that we get to modify our reality with our intents. And if our intents are negative and fearful, what we create for ourselves is a fearful, negative reality. So the more negative we get, the more negatively we interpret it. The more negatively interpret it, the more negative we get. The more negative we get, the more negatively interpret it. You see where that's going, folks? It just is a cycle that just goes downhill. And pretty soon, you are a mess. And you are unlovable. And you are inadequate. And you are, you know, abandoned. And you're all of those things because you've created that sort of a world for yourself. And other people really don't want to deal with all of that, you know, with all of your issues, you know. So you create the thing you fear. So if you don't want to create the thing you fear, there's only one way to do that. You can't think your way out of this. You can't say, well, I don't want to create what I fear, so I'm going to act different. It's not about acting. If you're not going to create your fear, the only solution is get rid of the fear. There is no other way. You can't think your way through it. You can't act your way through it. You have to get rid of the fear. Once you get rid of that fear, all this stuff will go away. You'll start seeing the world differently. That's why I you've heard me say here before that if you get rid of that fear, your life will become joy. Your life will become happiness. You'll be satisfied. You won't feel trapped. You won't feel like a little helpless person in a big mean world. You'll feel good about your life and how you're able to help and how you're able to contribute. And that's because you interpret things differently now. Now you see a problem, instead of woe is me, you see that as an opportunity to make good choices, an opportunity to give, an opportunity to see how you can help. You see, it's just a different viewpoint. So you end up happy. Not because your life now is blessed and, you know, every time you turn around, you find another gold brick, you know, sitting on the sidewalk for you to pick up and take home and put in your bank. It's not like that. It's just that
nice, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually,
that would be very weird finding a gold brick, but yes.
Yeah, you do get a little of that because the system starts to appreciate you as well, and the synchronicity tends to come your way. So you do get a little bit of that, just falls in your lap when you need it. But basically, you're reinterpreting the world in a positive way, and that leaves you happy. And you think, well, how could I do that? My surroundings are so negative. Everything and everyone sucks, everybody takes advantage of me. I'm just a little pawn in everybody's game, and how could I interpret that as anything but awful? Well, you can. You interpret that as awful because of the fears you have, and you're creating that as your reality because of the fears you have. And sure enough, people are going to see you that way, as that little person that is, that's kind of lost and not fun to be around and inadequate and insecure and all those things you're afraid of. That's what you'll become unless you get rid of the fear. So the question to ask is my life full of happiness, peace, and satisfaction, or is my life full of stress and struggle and pain? And if it's the stress, struggle, and pain, that's because of your fear. And that's not going to quit, even though you believe, well, if I could just fix that, everything would be just fine. If I could just make this happen or just get these people to stop doing that, everything would be fine. It won't work. It won't be fine. Even if they do that, there'll be something else. It may be fine for a few weeks or maybe a few months, but it'll be something else. You can't get out of it. It's a trap that you're in, that the only way you can get out is to get rid of the fear, you see. So many people live on the edge like, well, I'm almost there. If I could just get this done, if I could just fix this problem in my life, everything would be sweet. It's not sweet for very long, because the reason it's not sweet is you, not everybody else. And first things you have to realize, you have to take responsibility for that and stop blaming other people for your misery and your pain. So that was, I guess, a long speech. But basically, not only do these fears create, like relationship problems, which is kind of where you were starting with, because we put we put all these ideas that we think that person is being rude to us, when maybe they're not feeling that way at all. They're just saying something, and we interpret it. Somebody, I could be with someone, and I say, wow, look, what a great day. And that person might think, do you think I'm so stupid I can't even tell that it's a nice day? And they might think that I was being arrogant to tell them so it was a nice day. And I may just been feeling good about it because it's a pretty day. So people will interpret it in any way they want. You see, it's just the way we are, and there is a solution, and the solution really isn't that hard. You can do it. You just have to really want to. And if you really want to, you can succeed. The hard part is wanting to. It's so much easier just to blame everybody else and stay sad and unhappy than it is to start working on getting rid of the fear. So, and getting rid of fear is a scary thing. We start getting rid of that fear, and that fear starts to puff itself up and scare us to quit working on it. So that's the nature of fear.
It's true. It's a hard one because it's just so permeated in everything. We're not even aware of it. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but what's the first step? The first step is taking responsibility and seeing how that fear has affected everything, or that's just the intellectual aspect of it again, right?
Right. Well, we have to lead with our intellect.
We have to. Right?
We don't want to just, our intellect can't get rid of it, because then we're just acting. If it's just intellectual, then we're not really changing ourselves. We're just acting differently. So, but we can lead with our intellect. The intellect can point the direction. And, you can say, well, okay, I'm not happy. I have negative feelings all the time. Right. And whenever you have a negative feeling, what you can do is trace that back to a fear. Every negative feeling you have goes back to a fear. All the stress you have, all the anxiety you have, all the anger, all of that pain, all goes back to a fear. Well, find the fear and then look at it and own it. Say, yeah, that's my fear. I've got that fear, and that fear, affects my life. It affects my reactions to things. It affects the way I see reality. And just go back in your mind over the last couple of years of how that fear has been the thing that's led you to the choices you made, and how those choices just didn't work out all that well. They didn't turn out to be very good choices. And, whether it's a selection in a boyfriend or girlfriend or a mate, or whether it's, what job you decided to take or leave or anything else. If you do it from fear, it usually doesn't work out all that good. It's the wrong reason for doing it. And you'll look back and you'll see, wow, that fear has really messed me up. A lot of my choices have been poor because that fear's been making them. And then you just have to have the intent that get rid of it. Not to feel that way, not to act that way. That's not the point. Not to feel that way, not to feel that fear, not to interpret through that fear. And every time you catch yourself, just stop yourself, let it go, don't feel that way, and go on. Well, at first it's like you can't do anything about it. You catch yourself, but there in an hour you do it again. And you think, well, it's not working. That's not true. Just keep working at it. It takes some time. These fears are deep, and it takes a while to dig them out. So spend 6 months, a year, just with a strong intent. I don't want to feel that way. Not I don't want to be that way in the sense of action, but I don't want to be that way in the sense of being who you are. And feelings are representative of who you are. That's why I say, look at your negative feelings, because that's the negativity in you. That's your negative feelings. The feelings are us at our being level. So that's how you get rid of it. You just want to you have to want to get rid of it, and you have to stay focused on it for a time. And every time you feel it coming up, just don't feel that way. Just
don't.
Just don't. So let's say you start feeling anger. Somebody says something that you think's rude. You've interpreted it as rude. So you feel this anger coming up. Just say, stop, let it go, deep breath. Okay, I'm not going there. I'm not going to get whipped up in a tizzy and then say something rude back because, my feelings are hurt. Just let it go. So the not saying something rude back, that's acting, and that's nice, but it's just letting it go. Don't let it control you. Take control back from it. That's sort of what I mean. Take control back from it. Don't let it push you, but let it go. And then, of course, it'll come right back up again and do the same thing and keep doing that, and eventually you will win. The fear will disappear. But before you win, that fear is going to roar and growl and puff up and, sprout big teeth and do everything it can to frighten you to stop trying to get rid of it. So expect that fear to push back, and it'll push back and try to be as scary as it can. It'll tell you that if you get rid of that fear, you keep doing this, nobody will ever love you again. You'll just be a mess and so on. This is working. This new thing where you're going, that's not going to work. It's going to try to frighten you with things like that, but you just keep getting rid of that fear, and eventually it will go away.
It's funny. Every once in a while you talk about, and it reminds me, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Defending Your Life. It has Albert Brooks in it, and Meryl Streep, and Shirley MacLaine is in there as a kind of funny little thing, but basically they go to, I don't know, where you get to look over your life, and it's always, in Albert Brooks' case, they reviewed all of his fears. So they reviewed all the choices he made from a fear. And of course, Meryl Streep, well, she in this case, most of her things that she reviewed were based on love and how she was giving and caring, and he was the one that it's a funny show, but it's amazing because it was written back in the 90s, probably the early 90s, and it's a pretty accurate it's pretty amazing that there's a movie out there that talks about how we have to go through the only thing we have to review is our fears, unless we made more choices from a place of love than from a place of fear. But it's interesting how our fears can overtake the choices that we make, and that's the big thing that when the movie was trying to show, is that even from the point of he wouldn't go into a certain stock that he was given information on, and it was one that was going to be much more evolved as the time went on, but it was like a watch. But it was just the fact that he based his decision from fear instead of being able to just go through it and take that opportunity, and it would have made him really rich. But the point wasn't that he was going to be rich. The point was that he made the choice from a place of fear. And we do that so often. Like, that's the whole thing. That's the whole reason we're here, is to look at our choices, right? That our choices become that of love instead of fear. And so it's one of those things that you have to just keep saying, like, every time you make a different choice, you know, am I doing this from a place of fear, or am I doing it from a place of love? And well, we know that, you know, 99% of the choices we make are usually from that place of fear. And, you know, they talk about the law of attraction and how we say, you know, I want something. But as soon as you say want, you're really thinking of the opposite. And so it's really the fear that comes in, because as soon as you say, I really want something, or I really need it, the underlying intention there is a fear of not having.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating how it's just in everything, and we just don't realize it. And so that filter is really so incredibly amazing, how it assists us.
Yeah. Assists us to our growth and to our doom, you know, both. It can help us either way. But, you know, I have talked to lots of people about fear. It's one of the things I talk about. And when I give talks, I will often have people tell me that they, you know, don't think that they have any fears.
Yeah.
And they don't think that they really have much ego either. And I'll get that from them, and I'll say, well, do you ever have any feelings of that are negative? You ever angry? Oh, sure. Yeah. Do you ever feel like you're mistreated and you're not getting the sort of things you deserve, and people aren't appreciating what? Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. And I explain to them that that's the fear that they don't think they have, is that sort of thing. And I tell them to go work on it. And I hear back from them 6 months later, and they are overwhelmed. They went from, I don't have any fear, I can't think of a thing that really, you know, frightens me,
Right.
to every choice I make is based on fear. You know, I'm totally overwhelmed. I actually don't make any choices other than through fear. And they get overwhelmed by the amount of fear that they find in themselves. And then, you know, I tell them not to get overwhelmed. You know, don't get depressed with that fact. Just pick one and start working on it. And then once you get that one taken care of, pick the next one. And I hear back from them maybe a year later, and their life has changed completely, and their relationships have changed completely, and they're a totally different person living in a different world. So I've had dozens of people, you know, go through that process of believing they have no fears, and that whatever ego they have is pretty small and under control. Finding out that just the opposite is true, being overwhelmed, and then taking it seriously, you know, and working on it, and turning into new people who are happy, who really have fewer fears. And the hardest fear to get rid of is the first one.
Yes.
You know, so you just have to, you know, get through that. So that's the story. Yes, most of us walk around not thinking that we have many. Oh, everybody else does. Yeah, I can see that in everybody else, but not me. I really don't have those kinds of things, and I'm not self-centered, and I don't have a lot of ego or fears. But for the 99, probably 0.999% of us, that's just not true. We're full of fear right up to our eyebrows. Almost every choice we make is, if not directly because of our fear, it's tainted by our fear.
Yeah.
And the way we see reality, the reality we live in, is fear. And now, part of the problem, what we see today, is that the world itself seems a lot scarier than it used to be. And that's because we have been, particularly the politicians, I guess, have been beating the fear drums. Just, you know, well, we're on red alert now. Oh, well, okay, now it's just an orange alert. Oh, it's back red again. And we have all of this constant stress and fear going on. You know, the terrorists are going to get us, and something else is going to get us, and the aliens are going to get us, and the Mexicans are going to get us, the brown people are going to get us. We have all of this stuff, that's all this fear. And the reason that politicians like us to have lots of fears, because it makes us easy to control. Right. If you understand somebody's fear, well, you can make them dance to any tune you want them to dance to. they're yours. You can manipulate them. All you have to do is just say a few things that twang that fear, and you can get them to vote any way you want or do anything else you want, pretty much. So once we have this ubiquitous internet and television and radio and little cell phones with all this information in it, now, wow, if you're a propagandist, this is like living in a house full of candy. You've got all this opportunity to control people and manipulate them to do what you want, whereas before you stand up in a street corner on a chair and made a speech, and 20 people maybe heard it, and that's it. You see, you didn't have that big effect. But now, because of our communications technologies, the propagandists have just had a field day, and the way everybody manipulates everybody else is with fear. The way religion wants to manipulate you, to put more money in the plate, is through fear. The way the legal system wants to manipulate you to obey the laws is through the fear of what they're going to do to you if you get caught. The way the politicians want to manipulate you for your vote is because of fear. The way the marketers want to manipulate you to buy their product is through fear. Oh, if you don't buy this product, the girls won't like you. Oh, if you don't buy this product, the guys won't like you. It's all about fear. So everybody out there who would like to manipulate you is using the mass media to frighten you into doing what they want. So you go back 100 years and we didn't have that. And there wasn't that much fear in the land at that time. I remember being 5 or 6 years old, 7 years old, and I'd tell my parents, well, I'm going out on my bike now. And they'd say, come back before supper time. It was that sort of thing. Nobody would do that with their kid now. Parents don't let their kids get out of their sight because they're afraid of all the horrible things that will happen to them. And, just back, I'm 73, so just go back like 60 years or so, and the world wasn't like that. Kids could just go out and play. Parents didn't really have to know where they were. Kids were responsible enough to come home for dinner, and it just wasn't such a scary place. Well, all the marketers and the politicians and the priests and the preachers and on and on and on. And the marketers have been drumming fear into us over the last 50, 60 years to where now we're almost afraid of ourselves. We don't even like ourselves very much. We're afraid that we're not capable. We're afraid that, again, we're victims. All of that. There's so much fear. We're afraid for our children. We just are consumed with fear much more now. So that's partly why now our social life, our connections, our relationships are a lot more shallow and a lot more strained than they used to be. It's a problem. It's harder to have a good relationship now than it was 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, it wasn't all that easy. It still was hard because still two people were each interpreting their own reality, and most of what they were saying was just talking by each other rather than really understanding each other. But it's even worse now. So you have to work a little harder today than you used to because there is so much fear out there. Everything you see on your TV is fear. If you watch news, it's all about fear and destruction and death. If you watch, drama, it's all about fear, destruction, and death. If you watch comedy, it's mostly about fear, destruction, and death. If you watch KidVid, it's about fear, destruction, and death. All they do is change the characters. Now it's little pixies flying around in the KidVid that are fighting some other kind of pixie that's trying to take over Pixie Land, and it's all about fear and, war and fighting and death. That's what it's about everywhere. The movies you go to, mostly fear-based. The TV you watch is fear-based. Even the sitcoms are fear-based, except now the fears are inadequacy, feelings of, being insecure. Those are the fears. It's very hard in our culture to see anything, to interact with anybody that isn't full of fear-based junk. Well, why are we all walking around, uptight, full of stress and unhappy and, feel trapped and feel like our lives are full of pain? Well, it's all the fear. We're living in this culture of fear because that makes it easy for all the people out there who would like to manipulate us to manipulate us. And we use it to manipulate each other. We want somebody to do something. We try to say something that'll put pressure on them, which is fear, make them fear not doing it. So we use pressure, we use schemes, we sometimes throw fits so that, do what I say or I'm going to make your life miserable kind of thing. Well, that's using fear as a tactic. So even our relationships are often fear-based. So it's fear, fear, fear. And that's why we have so many unhappy people. If you just interview 1,000 people and say, are you just really happy and your life is terrific? Is that the way you are all the time? And probably out of that 1,000 people, you'd be lucky for one person to say, yep, that's me. It's probably maybe 1 in 10,000 would say, yep, that's me. And that's a sad thing. That's why we need to, get this ball rolling with these experiments to let people know that love is the answer. That's why we're here. It's not here about trying to get what you can get. It's not here. This pain is unnatural to us. We create that with our fear. It's not that pain is just a natural part of life. It seems that way, but it's unnatural. And all our fear is unnatural. It's natural to us to be happy. So it's just where we are. We get to create what we live in, and this world is partly just created by us. It is the way we are. We're fearful. It's a fearful place. So, we make it, and then we have to live in it, and that just makes us more fearful. So we make it more fearful, and then we have to live in it. Just makes us more fearful, and that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 50 years. So here we are. Now it's time to turn around and go the other way. I think everybody's just about to the point that they've had it with the way things are. Everybody's just about to the point of this isn't working. We need another viewpoint. We need another perspective, because what we're doing now is dysfunctional. Well, when people get to that, that's called the bottom of the barrel or the dark night of the soul or whatever. When people get to there, now they have a chance of going the other way, of seeing something different, changing directions. So I think we as a culture, and again, Western culture is almost world culture at this point, we as a culture need to turn around. We're about at the point where we're ready to throw away this fearful life that we have and grow up and try to become love. So I think the time is right. We just need to talk to enough people to get them to actually try to do it. And if we do, then we'll start making the world a better place. As you grow up, you help everybody else around you grow up. So that's kind of the point of why we're here and what's going on. It's all about fear. And we do these shows every month. We do these shows, and every month we tell people, you got to get rid of that fear. And a lot of people do. We get a lot of very positive comments that say, oh, yeah, this just hit the point, just what I needed to know, and they're going to go out there and get rid of some of their fear. And that's good. That's why we do it. And it does seem to work for some people, but for everyone that it works for, there's probably 100 that look at it and go, I got that. Yeah, that's right. And then go on with their life just the way it was. But, you do what you can do, and people will get it when they're ready.
And that's why we keep doing the show.
That's why we keep doing the show. Exactly.
Yeah. This almost feels like a good place to stop, although, my goodness, we're almost before the hour. I mean, is that even possible?
Well, only 4 minutes before the hour. That's pretty good.
There you go.
Yeah. Since I've been talking so much, I should give you a chance to.
Oh, I think I had my opportunity there, but I do think, to me, I think the time that we have to work with is really right about the time we are about to make a choice. And I know we make choices all the time, but if we could be aware of the time of the choices that we're making, if we could, as soon as we know that we're making a choice, or as soon as we know that we're going to, choose between this or that, or how we're going to respond, or as soon as we know there's an opportunity for a choice, then I think that's the opportunity for us to be aware of whether there's a fear or not. And most of the time, if not all of the time, those choices are often made from a fear. And there's a definition aspect to fear that a lot of people say, oh, I don't have fear, because they're thinking of the, I don't know, the science, the old paradigm of what fear is, which is, I'm afraid of snakes or, spiders, or so there's that specific thing where they're kind of looking at, the definition of fear. And I think, but that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, we're talking about all the fears and the kind of core fears that are, that are so prevalent in our society about not being enough and, being, well, look at the media. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's always about, how thin you can be and how, all of the people that are getting plastic surgery and all the things that they're doing because they're trying to, I just don't get it, but, they're trying to be
somebody they aren't.
That's it. Thank you. That's it. Yes. In hopes that somehow that will have people like them, or that they'll become more popular, or that, it'll boost their ego somehow. But yeah, they're trying to be someone else. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
The choices that you're talking about, of course, also we can call them your reactions to things. Right. Those are choices. So when somebody says something and it makes you angry, you have a choice. You don't have to be angry. There are other choices. Now, if you're very fearful and feel inadequate, then you feel like you have to be angry because that's just what boils up out of you is anger. But there are other choices. If you could get rid of that fear, you could choose to be something other than anger. Mm-hmm. So it's the fear that kind of dominates you to the point that you don't even know you're making a choice. If you think about it, you'll say, well, of course I got angry. Look, they just said that, I couldn't do my job well or something, and that's just not true, and I'm angry about that. So you don't even notice that you have a fear there. You just justify your anger because what so-and-so said and go on with life without even realizing that your fear just made that choice. If you didn't have the fear, that wouldn't have made you angry, and you could have solved the problem rather than just thrown gasoline on that fire. You could have actually put that fire out, perhaps, with a different kind of a reaction to it. So that's the kind of choices that we're talking about. Yes, not just the choice to not walk in the woods at night or avoid snakes. It's the fear of not being accepted, not being appreciated, not being given credit, not being taken seriously, not not being made to feel special. It's all these things, the I wants, I needs, and I'm not getting. All of that is fear. If you didn't have that fear, you wouldn't have those I wants, I needs. You feel good about yourself. Everything would be fine. You'd feel satisfied. So that's the choices we're talking about. Yeah. But even so, even if it's about the snakes and the bears in the woods, it's still true that your fears won't help you any. They'll just get you in more trouble. Even then. Because if you're afraid of the bear in the woods, you'll do the worst possible thing you could do. You'll see that bear and you'll run, and that bear will chase you because that bear chases things that run, because things that run are prey. So your fear is just not helpful anywhere. Just not helpful. It's when you can think well and you come in prepared. That's what saves you from bears and snakes, not being afraid of them.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's normal to be afraid of a bear, but but you need to be conscious and aware and make the right choices. But yeah.
But it's still not good to be afraid of that bear, because that bear can smell you if you're afraid of that bear, and that makes that bear even bolder. You see, it's just not helpful to be afraid of that bear ever. So fear, no matter what it is, even if it's about bears and snakes, is not helpful. It's always, something that creates a problem. So you need to get rid of all the fear, but the fear we're talking about is personal fear. Fear about us, inadequacy, abandonment, insecurity. All of those things are fears that most of us walk around with all the time, and they tend to dominate our life and dominate our choices. And because of that, we're unhappy, and we feel put upon. We don't feel appreciated, and we live in a sad place that's full of pain. And that's unfortunate, because 99% of all that pain is self-created. from our interpretation, from our stories. That's where the pain comes from. We make the pain because of the choices we make. Yeah, and that's a tough one for people to admit. All this pain and misery I'm in, it's mine, I make it. Most people don't want to admit that. They want to blame it on somebody else. But that's the first step, is own it. And then you can make the next step. If you don't own it, you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of something you don't own.
All right. Well, you have been listening to News for the Heart. Please take advantage of this amazing opportunity to be part of something really big. Check out his, what is it called? Your
Kickstarter.
Yes, check that out.
Campaign. Kickstarter campaign. Yeah.
And, yeah, take advantage of it, because it really allows us to be part of something much bigger that's coming, and that's exciting. So, again, thank you, Tom. Love having you on the show. And we've been getting to the heart of what matters with Tom Campbell on filters, on his campaign that he's doing, the Kickstart campaign. And we'll be back. I don't know when it is, but it's coming soon. All right. Take care. Thanks.
Have a question for Laurie and want to be on the next News from the Heart show? Drop us a line via instant feedback at bmajor.org. News from the Heart is brought to you by Intuitive Soul and is produced by Major Radio for Clear Channel's iHeartRadio and bmajor.org.